So as you all know, our speaker today is Ron Frost, and his message is Love on a Spectrum. Ron is an author, speaker, life coach, and sales coach. He is also a licensed spiritual practitioner that studied under Reverend Shell here at the Center for Spiritual Living, Cape Coral. However, he's now based out of the Center for Spiritual Living in Sarasota. Ron's popular book, Getting Unstuck, The 9 Keys to Creating More Prosperity, Fulfillment, and Joy, is a practical self-coaching guide to help the reader live a more self-aware and empowered life. He and his book have been featured on numerous podcasts, as well as AM and FM radio talk shows across the nation. He is the founder of Positive Momentum Coaching, a leader of the Southwest Florida Speakers Toastmasters Club, and a former member of our very own Center's Leadership Council. Ron's biggest love is his family, which comprises his beautiful wife, Bonnie, their 2 amazing daughters, Nicole and Ashley, and 3 dogs and 2 cats. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Ron Frost. Please give him a great round of applause.
Thank you. I kind of stuffed my wire a little bit into my pocket there. It was kind of like pulling on me a little bit. Is my slide available? So, truth be told, we may have to upgrade the intro. There's actually in this picture, there's 5 dogs. And a little bit of the story behind this is, well, Lola was the first one in the family. She was actually found by a dumpster in downtown Sarasota, and after weeks of nobody claiming her, and even though she didn't have a chip, we tried the best we could, it became adopted into our family. Otis, well, my youngest daughter has this way of finding animals and then giving them. And so my youngest daughter, Ashley, bought Otis, figuring we needed another pug, right? Because you couldn't just have one pug. So we needed another pug, and that was a birthday present to my wife, Fonnie. In Guinness, again, Ashley fell in love, I think it was on Match.com for dogs or something like that. And Guinness was being given up by a family in the Keys, and my daughter drove all the way down to the Keys to get Guinness, only to find out that Guinness is not considered an apartment-sized dog. So, and I'm sure Guinness was probably not, feeling like being, segregated. I'm not an apartment-sized dog. I can't play with all the other dogs. Guinness came over to our house the next day and stayed there ever since, where we have a yard, and of course we have other dogs to play with. Now, Cooper and Axel, my daughter, once again, is visiting. So are these dogs, but I really don't know. So then by the next time I speak here, I'll give you an update. And actually we have 3 cats and not 2. Again, one of those cats came from my beautiful daughter, Ashley. Dad, just give me a moment. I'll figure something out. I'll find a place. Just can you take care of that? That ends up going on and on. So, love on a spectrum is such a beautiful thing that we are in this moment understanding, embracing, and knowing the truth of ourselves, that we are divine beings of light, of grace, of God, but yet we show up in many, many different varieties. And it's one of those things that when we live in this physical time-space reality and we look around and we see different shapes and sizes of humans, as well as nature itself, of dogs, we know that even in a species such as dog, it's really nothing but unconditional love. They wrestle, they play, Otis is actually the alpha dog. Otis is like the one that's in charge of the whole house. Until they get too loud, and then my cat Tiger comes out and wants to slap them all. But when it comes to us being humans, sometimes we got to think like, our pups, our friends. Spell it backwards, it's God. So sometimes we start to sit there and we start to wonder, like, well, why now? Why are we talking about this subject? This is the 21st century. What? Aren't we already spiritual beings? Don't we already get along, right? And yet sometimes we're triggered. We have to be honest. Raise your hand if you've ever been triggered. Raise your hand if you still sometimes judge, right? Yeah, just pretend in your mind for a second that this huge black SUV that's been jacked up with monster motors, you know those kind I'm talking about? That's blaring its stereo out the windows, that comes flying down the highway and cuts you off and sends you into the bushes. You got a vision of that? Okay, the backstory is, it was a 93-year-old grandmother whose 67 Buick was in the shop getting repaired, and the rental car company only had one vehicle. And she couldn't see over the windshield, the steering wheel, and she didn't know how to work the controls or the music. And all she was trying to do was get home and bake some cookies so she can bring them to the Center for Spiritual Living. Different picture? Meanwhile, in your mind, you probably beeped your horn and gave half a peace sign. The truth is, we're human, and yet we still need to work on this. We still need to integrate it. And I believe there's three basic concepts, three basic things. One is love. One is to be more love, not less, in every given situation. And the second is to be understanding. The more that we can be understanding, the more that we can integrate, the more that we can get together. And the last one is connection, and to be intentional with our connection. Because sometimes we get so removed, or we avoid connection, or we fall prey to the devices that are sucking our time away. And we don't connect with nature, we don't connect with ourselves, and we certainly sometimes don't even connect with other human beings. We fall into that judgment or belief system. And we have this variety, just like a prism, where we have one source, this infinite source of natural light, of sunlight, and it casts out from itself the many variations of colors, the many hues. Human. And we see that expression in different countries of origin, different cultures and subcultures, different races, different genders, sexual expression, different belief systems. You can go on and on. There's different shapes and sizes of us humans. Even different creative expressions, right? We're all wired a little differently. We all have different life purposes. Imagine if everybody just, their destiny was to be a plumber. Nothing wrong with plumbers. But imagine that, we'd have great running water and flushing toilets, but the truth is, we're variety. We have artists, we have architects, we have dreamers, we have people that are great at math and people that just aren't good at math. Yeah, but they're good at something else. And so there's this vast variety. And interestingly, even energetically, we're different. I remember years ago reading about Kirlian photography. How many people are familiar with Kirlian photography? That's where they're able to photograph auras. And they had something like 20 people, and each, just like a snowflake, was different. Their colors were different, their shapes, their sizes were different. And this is something our natural eyes don't pick up. But with Kirlian photography, it was like, there's a variety here. There's love on a spectrum energetically. And if you're familiar with anybody familiar with human design? Okay, so human design, much like gene keys, which is becoming more popular, is basically it's integrating ancient traditional practices of the I Ching, the Kabbalah, the astrology, also the chakra system, and it's coming up with a template or a blueprint. And most of the people, when they look at their own human design, they say, that's me. It's like an awakening experience. And if you're not familiar with human design, just Google free human design chart. There's so many people giving them away free, and plug in your information, and you'll be astounding. And sometimes we're trying to fit in. It's like everybody's pedaling a bike, but we don't realize we're really in a canoe and we should be rowing. So your human design allows you to understand your life strategy and understands basically that, hey, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a beautiful blossom of the one divine thing. So regardless of how we look at the spectrum of life, we start to see, like, is there something else that we can do there? And this whole issue of being able to transform and transcend anything comes from more love, not less. Understanding and connection. Now, with love, I like to say, just like Gandhi's quote, be the change you wish to be in the world. Be the love you wish to see in the world. If you did that, the change will happen. Be the love that you wish to see in the world. And sometimes that's not always easy, especially when your expectation of love isn't reflected back at you. And we have all had that happen. We've all had that time when something happens and we just, for some reason, we come into like this, what we call a knee-jerk response. We come into that attitude, but not necessarily that higher consciousness of love. But even when we're not loved, if we can represent love, if we can be loving. Years ago, my friend Neil told me about a puppy that he had, a very lovely dog, a very lovely companion, and he got lost in the woods. And then he went to find him, and he found out that the dog hind leg was caught in a hunter's trap. And the first thing Neil tried to do was try to rescue his dog, and his dog bit him. Now, finally, they got the dog. The dad helped, and they finally were able to get the dog out of the trap. The dog was fine. The dog was free. The dog was loving again. But when Neil asked his dad, why did my dog, who I love, bite me? When dogs are in pain, or when people are in pain, or wherever the thing is that their unhappiness, their suffering, their conditionals, that they spew out into the world, not necessarily knowing that they are. Have we done that? Have we been in pain? So to be loving, even when love isn't showing up, is a hard thing to do. But that's one of the first things and one of the best things that we can do. And I like to say, when it comes to being able to integrate love on a spectrum, one of the coolest things to do is to practice yourself or with a group of friends, what I call the reincarnation game. You don't have to believe in reincarnation to play the reincarnation game, because it's all pretend. But what you do is you choose the opposite of what you are. Your past life was, if you're white, you have to choose a different race, Asian or African American. If you're female, you have to be a male. If you're straight, you have to be gay. If you're a Christian, you have to be Hindu or Muslim or what. So you have to play a different role in that past life. And I have people actually say, let's share it, let's journal it, let's feel it. Let's walk a mile in their other person's shoes. And interestingly, I had gone to a past life regression years ago, and it never happened to me. It's like, oh, I didn't get a past life regression. But the person sitting next to me said it was the most transforming thing in the world. He said, I can't hate anymore. I just had all these lifetimes I just envisioned that were, radically different from who I am now, and my opinion completely changed about the world around me. Play the reincarnation game. Integrate love into the moment. And self-love is one of the biggest things. So if we're still feeling triggered, right? If something is still, irking us or triggering us, we need to be able to shine a light on that and love that too. Now, understanding is something that we can choose. We can fight against, or we can choose to understand. Ernest Holmes quite often quotes, to be for something and against nothing. To be for something and against nothing. And so for me, when I was 28 years ago, I fell in love with my beautiful wife, Fani. Some of you have met Fani before. And I met her in Indonesia, and we wanted to get married, and we wanted to get married in Indonesia. That was our choice. It made it so much easier to be able to do the paperwork, to have her come over. Anyways, long story short, the Indonesian government says, in order for the two of you to get married, you need to be the same religion. I know, don't push against. Here I was going to take on the whole Indonesian government on this matter. So Fani grew up, and as many of you know, my mother was Catholic, My father was Protestant. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, and I am blessed by so many beautiful religions. I love everybody, and I don't identify necessarily with a religion. It doesn't mean I'm against any religions. I just don't identify with any of them. I don't want to, as my own label, myself. I'm more of a spiritual being, having a human experience, not necessarily fitting in any one particular religion. So anyways, in order for us to get married, this was the choice. So again, to be understanding, I just said, well, my choice was to just get married before something was to be married to my beautiful wife, Bonnie. Be against nothing was whatever system was saying I had to do something a certain way. And so we went ahead with but before we got married, they brought out the paperwork. There's always paperwork and everything. And there's always the signatures and the official government stamp of approval. And the paperwork, basically was identifying that I was changing into a different religion. But then it said, what are you changing from? And the options, the boxes that were there was Catholic, was Protestant, was Jewish, was Hindu, was Buddhist. It was like all these other standard religions, but there was like no other fill in the blank. There was no checkbox like all the above. So I'm like, okay, I'm stuck here. And anyways, I forget how it was. I think they said, well, what was your father? And I said, well, he was Protestant. Okay, good, you're done. Let's get married. And everything went beautifully. And actually, here's the very odd thing. We moved to South Carolina. We come over. My parents live in Connecticut. We stay in Connecticut for a while with my family. We have a beautiful party reception there as well. And then we moved to South Carolina. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to visit a mosque? I thought it would be. I couldn't find one in South Carolina. It was very, very difficult. And so finally, I find a mosque through a couple of people that told me that this would be a beautiful place to go. And I drive to, I think it was Columbia, South Carolina. And I show up, and I get greeted by Brother Farouk, who today is still a good friend of mine. Everybody I met there it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey. But the interesting thing, and it's a true story, is that they had just gone through a huge transformation. They were formerly the Nation of Islam. And they decided that they were going to be more inclusive. So they would decide, and guess who walks through the front door? So love is happening all the time, and to be understanding and to know transformation is happening, that consciousness is awakening. It's always been awakening, and it still is awakening. And people, when they see that, we need to make a change. And to be in that moment, to know that their community decided that they wanted to be open. They wanted to be open. And at the moment of being able to show up and to connect and to embrace and to see everybody, true connection really, really happens when you're in the company of other people. And so one of the last principles is not just understanding, not just loving, but this whole thing about connection. Somehow our world has gone into different directions, and maybe because we were secluded for a while during COVID, maybe we had to adopt to different ways where we were seeing people through screens. But I don't know about you, but I absolutely miss connection. I miss hugs. I miss looking people in the eyes. And back when I was traveling internationally, when I would go into a different culture, it was like immersion, right? You are one with everybody in that culture. I didn't notice anything until I would get a photo. Like they would share like a group photo, and I'm like, oh, I'm a slightly taller white guy in the middle of this photo. I look different, but I didn't necessarily feel different. And I think that's what's missing, is I think sometimes we just need to be able to connect. And that ability to connect is the ability to understand, the ability to have empathy, the ability to know that everybody has times when there's struggle. You don't have to travel to another country to do this. It's a matter of taking time. I had a friend that wanted to Zoom me. I call it Zoom. I wanted to connect by Zoom. And I'm like, you live in Sarasota and I live in Sarasota. Let's go to a coffee shop. Really? We can do that? I'm like, yeah, I think that would be totally cool. Let's go to a coffee shop. But no, we've been we've got our life has been consumed about staring at one of these things, whatever the neatest electronic, and even TVs, which have been around for the longest time. And TVs, they don't necessarily, like, especially news, they don't promote good news, right? They're focused, chaos, anything that you can say that the negativity, it sells. It attracts people and it sells advertising. So you're not, if the Girl Scouts are selling cookies down on the corner, sorry, they're not going to get any attention because something crazy that happened in another part of the world is going to be main focus. So if you want to do yourself a favor, shut off the TV, go down the corner and get a cookie. We can transform just from human to human connection, and we can do that in a moment. Take a moment for a while and just kind of look. Turn and look at other people, turn and look at your neighbor, turn around from one seat to the next seat, turn and gaze across the room, and as you look at everybody's eyes, just notice that there's not a single person in this room that hasn't hurt, that hasn't had a moment where things didn't go their way, that hasn't had a moment where they maybe lost something, lost a loved one, lost a pet. We all breathe, we all feel, we all have hearts that beat. We're all human. And when we connect on that moment, that's where we can really truly integrate this oneness. And when we do that from love, and we do that from the perspective of understanding and intentionally getting out from whatever's got us mind trapped into that human-to-human moment, a human-to-human connection. Finding out, listening to the other person, about them, about their family, about their life. Be the listener. Be the open-hearted listener. This is where true connection really, really happens. And lastly, sometimes there is what we call the outside influence. The outside influence is sometimes there's something drama that's going on in the world that sometimes tries to trigger us. And if we look at, I spoke before about the law of polarity, which basically expresses that God is love, pure divine. We can have a spectrum. And in that spectrum, we can have as good as love can be and as bad as it can be. And to understand that sometimes there's the manipulator within the system. And as you start to explore other spiritual books, whether it's Dolores Cannon's 3 Waves of Volunteers, or whether it's the Law of Attraction books which have been channeled, or the Law of One, which talks about that the same thing. It's the same principles that you see over and over again. Even Barbara Marciniak's, the messages from the Palladians, right? That there's this small group that's the troublemakers, the outside instigator, the outside influencer. But we can still be loving to that. Love starts within. Love starts within. Transformation starts within. And we're during this time of great awakening. Even the darkness is coming forth, is showing itself. And I will end and wrap up on what I would say is probably one of the most significant messages in a children's book, which you've all probably seen, which is The Grinch That Stole Christmas, right? So here we got this ugly green monstery looking thing with somewhat reptilian eyes that's causing a problem to the people of Whoville. Dresses up like Santa Claus, which is the big lie, only to steal the Christmas tree and all the Christmas gifts, to try to disrupt and disturb. But yet, it didn't happen. No, everybody in Whoville still, Christmas morning, joined hands, sang a song of joy. They embodied love. Even though there was conflict, they understood. Joining hands is symbolic of connection. We can transform this world on any level, whether we look at it from the perspective of the spectrum that's right in front of us, or the greater spectrum of the world, or whatever that's coming up inside of us that we don't feel good, we feel icky about, right? We can integrate that through the embodiment of self-love, through the choosing of being understanding, and the choosing of the ability to connect. Let us take this moment into prayer. As I recognize that there is this one infinite grace, one infinite beauty, one infinite love, one infinite joy. Whether we call it Spirit, the great Creator, or simply by the word God, is the essence to which everything is birthed out of. The vast variety, the vast creation, the vast expression that shows up in so many beautiful ways. And as I know this truth of this infinite beingness, this infinite space, this infinite love, that it is loving, that it is understanding, that it is connecting, and it is one with myself. One with the infinite that I am as it, and even in this moment of my words of prayer, and the same truth for all those that are here within the sanctuary, as well as online and listening at this now moment. That we are empowered by Spirit, that the glorious good of this present moment, the love on the spectrum that is deep within our hearts, that is blossoming and transforming not only us, but as we are all an integral part of the divine matrix of humanity, that is changing and transforming the world at large. In gratitude, I surrender. And let us anchor this with the words, and so it is.